right, here we are. It's live, the COVID live lecture. All right, public opinion. When Abraham Lincoln gave the Gettysburg Address way back when, he made this famous statement, which we all are familiar with today. He said, "Government of the people and by the people and for the people shall not perish from the earth." So let's go back to the "not perish from the earth," although it seems particularly apropos at the moment. But government of the people, by the people, and for the people. What does that mean? That suggests that the government should do what the people want. However, it's not always that easy. For example, the Equal Rights Amendment, the ERA, failed even though a majority of Americans and a majority of states wanted it. On the other hand, court-ordered busing to end segregation. A majority of Americans didn't want it, but that was court-imposed. In fact, a majority of Americans detested it. So what were the framers thinking about this new republic and how it would be carried out? They did not want a government that would carry out the transitory passions of the people, the day-to-day passions of people. Rather, they wanted a government that would achieve substantive goals. Many of those substantive goals are listed in the preamble to the Constitution. To form a more perfect union, that's in fact why they were creating this new Constitution. The Articles of Confederation were inadequate. They wanted to establish justice, ensure the domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty. The means to achieve those intents, those purposes, i.e. that there would be majority rule, that fits with Lincoln's definition, government of the people and by the people. But how do you do that? How do you get that majority aspect of democracy, but yet also protect individual rights? There were several ways they tried to achieve that. One was by federalism, which we discussed previously. Separation of powers, likewise in the Bill of Rights, and independent judiciary, would all be checks. These would be instances, like for instance with the Bill of Rights. You have the right to own a gun, Second Amendment right. It doesn't matter what the majority wants. It doesn't matter if the majority wants to limit your right to own a gun. The Second Amendment preserves that right. Now I realize some people would disagree with that statement, but you could take any right in the Bill of Rights, and it's the same argument. Whether or not an individual would agree or disagree with a particular right is another question. Certainly, though, it seems that the Second Amendment, based on its language, guarantees the individual right to own a gun. Others argue it's collective, but that's neither here nor there for our discussion. Only that the Bill of Rights were to be a check on public opinion or upon majority rule. So why did they need these checks? Why did the founding fathers need these checks? Now we're actually getting into the PowerPoint. We'll go through them slide by slide now. That was kind of the introduction there. All right. So the founding fathers believed that in a republic there would rarely be public opinion. That's because their definition of public opinion is different than our definition of public opinion. They believed that public opinion was beliefs held by the entire population on matters of government and politics. Today we would call this a narrow view of public opinion, but that's the view the founding fathers had of public opinion. Your text cites a different definition of public opinion. You could argue that it's a broad definition. It says the collective attitudes of citizens on a given issue or question. But the founding fathers were looking not for unanimity necessarily, but for a large agreement of people. So they realized there would rarely be public opinion, or in other words, opinions that we all had. Rather, they believed there would be many publics or factions holding many different opinions. And so how do you get this large group of people together who have different opinions, and how do you take what the public wants when everybody doesn't want the same thing and make public policy? So those were those issues. Which bring us to another question. Can we trust public opinion? That's this discussion with what the founding fathers wanted. They wanted a majority of people, a large majority of people, to think something before the government did it. again, going back to the definition, beliefs held by the entire population on matters affecting government politics. So there would rarely be that public opinion. And so if you look at what happens in the modern world today, there are other problems with there are problems with public opinion. You can understand why the founding fathers would have that view. So what are some of the problems with public opinion? Mark Twain put it this way. He said there are lies. There are damnable lies. So you see a progression here. The progression is these lies are getting worse. First lies, and not just lies, but damnable lies. And finally he says, then there are statistics. In other words, what Mark Twain is suggesting is an individual can say anything they want with statistics. You look at some of these polls that come out, and it says 70% of Americans think this. Well, what were the questions that were asked? How was the sampling done? Were there alternatives given? There are just so many problems with how a poll is conducted, and we've learned more and more as we've gone about trying to conduct these polls. But nevertheless, and even the way the polling questions are set up is problematic. So there are these issues with public opinion. Furthermore, there are some other issues with public opinion that you may not be familiar with, so we want to talk about those. First is people feign knowledge. They feign it. They fake it. What does that mean? They're embarrassed, and so when a pollster asks them a question, they don't want to appear ignorant or stupid or not in the know, and sometimes they'll say things that they just don't know. For example, and I realize this is an old example, but I love this example. In 1983, pollsters asked Americans what they thought of the monetary control bill. About 25% of the people were for it, about 25% of the people were against it, and about the other 50% just didn't know. Turns out that the monetary control bill didn't actually exist. So citizens that were asked this question by pollsters just took a look at what monetary meant and made an assumption based on the words that were there, when in reality the bill didn't even exist. So this raises a question. Can we trust public opinion if people really don't even know some of the things that they're responding to? Next issue with public opinion. The wording of a question by a pollster can dramatically impact the outcome of the public opinion poll. So we said earlier what questions are asked, or how were the questions asked. So here's a poll that is done with a one-sided question. Here's the question. Do you agree or disagree with the following statement? The government should see to it that all people have adequate housing. So just ask yourself, do I agree with that or not? Okay, well, when the question was asked with a one-sided question, the respondents, 55% of the respondents said they agreed with that statement. 45% said they disagree. But that is a one-sided question. What if another option was given? And so here's a two-sided question with the government option first. It matters which option is given first. People tend to, that don't know something, tend to, not always, but tend to take the first option first. So here's the same idea, but with two sides to the question. Some people feel that the federal government should see to it that all people have adequate housing, while others feel each person should provide for his own housing. Which comes closest to how you feel? So think about that for a second. And here are the results. Now the results were almost the exact opposite. There was an option given and a second option given, and people began to rethink it. Now, what if we changed, so you see the dramatic difference in the outcome. What if we were to change the two-sided question to have the individual responsibility side asked first? So here's the two-sided question with the government option second and this individual responsibility asked first. Some people feel that each person should provide for his own housing, while others feel the federal government should see to it that should say that all people have adequate housing, which comes closest to how you feel. So think about that for a second. Now I realize with you, you've seen the first question, so it may not change how you feel, but look at the results that actually occurred. A dramatic reversal from the first one-sided government option. Now it's just blown out of the water, and the idea that the government is not responsible now holds a commanding majority of 70.5% versus the 29.5%. So you see that the order and the wording of a question has a dramatic dramatic impact in the outcome of a public opinion poll. So here is that just a chart illustrating that all again. In addition to that, there's another problem with public opinion. Stability and intensity of belief. Stability, intensity of belief is how firmly do you hold an opinion? For instance, if I were to ask you, do you agree or disagree with abortion? Would you hold that same opinion 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now? If you're more likely to hold it for a long, long time, you are said to have said to have stability in that opinion. Individuals who change, there's nothing wrong with that. They change, but the challenge here is, how do we measure intensity or stability of belief in public opinion polls? So let's say, for instance, that a government comes out and says, 62% of the people feel this. And they, in fact, may. But how strongly do they feel that? That is much more difficult to measure. That's much more difficult to measure. Okay, we'll stop right there with this one. We'll pick up with the next slide, which will be 15.